Here's Hargreaves, chance for Torquay. Chris Hargreaves, the captain. If he stays onside, Carlisle checks instead. He's looking for Benyon. Sills!
Welcome back to this part of the Gull'S Eye View. We've got the great Paul Mulhern with us. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you for inviting me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. And for those who didn't know, he is, of course, the BBC Radio Devon commentator for most games at Plainmoor. He's been sort of on our airways for many, many years. Recently, I joined him summarising. He was absolutely brilliant to me, and we had it was great. What a great team. Hopefully, we'll be doing that soon as well. So, Paul, you've been a commentator for a long time. We had Jim Proudfoot on a few months ago, and we were talking about the art of commentary. But what made you get into commentary? What do you sort of enjoy the most about it?
Well, it was actually one of my friends who was quite heavily involved with Torquay a few years ago that got me involved. Steve Breeds might be a name that most of you recognize. He used to run a travel club, and then he got involved in the radio, and one day he asked me to go down, and it was I went to Plymouth Argyle, was my debut when they did the Alan Mills last game in charge.
Right.
Last season at Torquay were in the league, so unfortunately my little bit of a jinx to Torquay United.
Oh, now we've worked out why.
Yeah.
Decade of failure.
But I went down there and I'd done co-commentary for quite a few years before, and the radio must have thought I'd done all right, and I got more heavily involved in it. And listen, it's every boy's dream, isn't it, really? Sort of boy or girl's dream in this day and age. It's but it's just something I love doing, and it's what is it they say? If you enjoy your job, you'll never work a day in your life, and I think that's probably the best way I can describe doing the commentary. I just really love doing it, and I get to meet so many great people and work with so many great people. And as I said, it's like even the boring 0-0 draws, I still find a way in enjoying them somehow.
I agree. So you've gone through all those years. Who are your favourite sort of people and your favourite moments, favourite moments on? Because there's been a lot of ups and downs, mainly downs, to be honest, as we point out. But what have been your favourite moments that you've commentated on over the last few years? Put you on the spot there.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed the first year I did main commentary was not last season, but the first time in the National League South. Yeah. So there were a lot of really good games and whatever, you know, and it was so enjoyable doing it. And I managed, if you recall, the BBC, a decision was made, and maybe that they weren't going to do all the games live, but as the season went on, more and more came in, and that's when they gave me a chance, and I did what they basically called was as if commentary. So it wouldn't be broadcast live, but I would be sitting there at a final third commentary was what they called it. So for argument's sake, if you know there was a chance coming up, I would kick in to do some commentary, and it got me some good practice in. And as I said, it seemed that they quite liked what I was doing, and I'm so fortunate. BBC Radio Devon are a very, very highly respected outfit within the industry as well. And some of the people that I work for and with are just outstanding. And it's like, you know, some people say it's a hard job. To me, it's not. I get to sit in the best seat in the house and talk about football. What more could you want? But down in the studio, they're the ones, as I said, it's like you've become a little bit familiar with them, Sam.
Brilliant. They're so slick. They're so good. They're so on it. Amazing.
I've done a couple of stuff for other stations before, mainly reporting. And I'm not going to run anybody down. This is more complimentary about Radio Devon, but believe me, the amount of times that people have come up to me at games and said, if you work for Radio Devon, you must be good type of thing. That's for others to judge. But I don't think Radio Devon give work to people that are not so clever, shall we say. So it's quite an honour and a privilege.
Oh, it's a massive honour.
Work for them, like, you know, and the fact that they keep asking me back, I must be doing something right. I can't say what it is, but enjoy it anyway, to be fair.
Clive, Chris, I'll bring you into it. Have you got any things to go into?
Who's your favourite commentator? I'm sure you're not going to say that you model yourself on anybody, but TV or radio, who have you admired over the years?
Well, actually, ironically, I watched the episode when you had Jim Proudfoot on there, and I've known of Jim for quite a few years, but I was glad that he said some of the things he did, because one of my friends at work for some bizarre reason, seemed to think I was sitting there in, like, you know, a mobile studio with 6 screens in front of me and people in my ear telling me what's happening. But as Sam can confirm, he wasn't. But I think Jim's done a lot of work in radio. So I'm not just saying that because he was on here and because he's associated with Torquay.
Yeah.
I thought he's a really, really good commentator, really good. Other ones, I think it's just a case of, you know, probably it's dependent on the result a lot of times, like, you know, sort of thing, whether somebody's having a good game or whatever. But I'd say for radio, probably Jim Proudfoot would be one that I do admire a lot. But as I said, Clive, as you mentioned, there's no point modelling yourself on anybody, because I think Jim alluded to this when you spoke to him. All you're going to be is a poorer version of that person, like, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm good, bad, or indifferent. That's for other people to decide, sort of thing. It's but I just try my best, get on with it, and hopefully, you know, people seem reasonably happy with what I'm doing. So fingers crossed that continues.
That's great. Chris?
Can I ask, Paul? Yeah, it's something that interests me. I mean, I've always had an interest in it, in that something I looked at when I was much younger in kind of commentary and sports broadcasting. But one thing that's always interests me is that, you know, you listen to football on the radio, we watch, you know, Sky Sports or TNT or whoever, and the kind of the random stats that just come out at, like, you know, any given moment, like when it's a substitution being made or someone scored a goal or whatever. And Adam Summerton, the guy who's worked for BT and then TNT, who obviously does a lot of he does a lot of stuff on a much higher level now, and he quite often, sometimes on X, he'll share his preparation notes, and I think people forget that. You just listen to it, you hear stats and whatever, and you kind of don't think where they come from. But can you just give us an idea as to kind of the type of, I guess, especially at our level, where, you know, stats and information is probably not as readily available on some of our opponents than it is certainly higher level. It's just kind of the preparation that you do, and also how you know when to drop those stats, if you know what I mean.
It's very, very difficult, Chris. I said to Sam the day Sam joined me, I'm not a huge stats man, and for that, the reason during the game, I mean, because the way I look at it, I know that the audience that's going to be listening to me and whoever I'm with, the reality is they probably know as much about Torquay as I do already. And sometimes I sit there and I listen to people, and, you know, if you're listening to a game, Chris, truthfully, do you want to know who played in the 1976 FA Cup?
No.
Probably not. In truth, you want to know more about it. But
we're painting a picture, aren't we, of the game? That's the point.
That's the idea, Sam, hopefully, as I said. But for, obviously, you're going to have fill-in moments, so to speak, like, you know, which I like to think that I bring in my co-commentator quite a lot. But when I look for the stats, I'll look for, maybe not stats, maybe information, maybe if it's a player that's, you know, played at a higher level, whatever, or achieved quite a lot in the game. But I will concede I'm not hugely heavy on the stats. And as you alluded to there, Chris, finding out information at this level is, oh dearie me, it is so difficult. Honestly, you know, you look onto it. Actually, Sam put me onto a website. I used a couple of websites and for informations and stuff, and a lot of times people don't realise this, but I'm literally sitting there trying to work out an opponent's formation. In fact, against Dorking on the game that you did, I went to their guy and he said, right, this is how we're going to play. And he had the number 6 defensive midfielder playing as a striker, and that came from them. And I'm going, well, if you don't know that, how am I going to know it? Sort of.
And then 5 minutes in the game, we were like, hang on a minute. He's not playing that.
Don't recall his name. I remember he was wearing, I'm sure it was number 6, and I'm looking at Sam and I'm going, he's not playing as a striker there. The defence. So it is difficult. It takes a lot of time, to be honest, maybe more than people appreciate, to get information. I could go on and read, you know, websites, but one thing you'll find as well, Chris, if you ever look into it, if you want to go on random club in the National League South, even go onto their website, and half of them don't update it for about a month at a time. So difficult. And
Transfer Market and SofaScore are the best ones. I think when I signed up to it, I brought us a sheet, and it literally had all the players and where their last club was, and sort of if they just come back from injury, you watch the presser, and that's sort of level of information I aspire to, really, with that sort of thing. That's what we kind of used.
It's the best one. Thank you for putting me onto that.
Yeah, that's right. That is good.
I use Soccerway as well, and they're actually pretty good for the league, you know, the National League and above. And they put the formations out, and you get a rough idea. I know things change, but for most of them in the National League South, as I said, when the Dorking Wanderers media team are telling me that their defensive midfielders playing up front, a lot of it needs to be worked out. Like, you know, I was just like, they might have been winding me up. They might have been doing it for a laugh. I'm not sure. But
and games get changed halfway through games as well. And actually, Dorking did sort of play a bit differently to in lineup how we thought that day. So it's very interesting, isn't it?
I'm probably
right,
the guy.
I think that there won't be many neutrals listening to your commentaries. I don't think. And really,
correct.
Really, we want to know what the score is, what the atmosphere,
where the ball is.
Yeah, exactly, and how they're playing. I mean, I don't care for tactical analysis, and I don't mind reading about it on a Sunday, but I don't particularly want to hear as the game goes on a Saturday.
I was thinking, bloody hell, Clive.
That's what I think.
You've read my match reports, mate. You know exactly the level of detail that I go into.
Some that come now and again, I said, I'm not going to criticise anybody for it if that's what they want, but you've kind of summed up how I view the listenership in general. I don't believe there's too many people that tune into Radio Devon to hear myself and whoever's with me or any commentator going on about games of old and what used to happen, whatever, because most of them, the reality is the vast majority of them will be pretty much dyed-in-the-wool Torquay fans that can't get to the game for one reason or another. And they want to know what's happening now. And that's the kind of line I've tended to go down and hope being successful.
I agree. It's one thing I've learned from that day, actually. It's kind of to do with like football media. And I think there's a clip about it. So, you know, when you watch Sky Sports News, and I also they are quite intense with these news people, but it's because they've got a count in their ear. And you know, that's one bit I really struggled with because I wasn't ready for it. You know, we went to half time and you've got some very nicely saying in your ear going 50 seconds to break, 30 seconds, 20, 10. That's one bit I found difficult because like you've got to get it to like get the right length. And you think when you watch any news program now, they've got that in their ear constantly. Like that made me like view like news reporters a lot differently with a lot more respect when I did that.
It's one of them. I mean, they'll always come to the commentator for the final countdown, Sam. But as you said, it's like the last game at Plainmore there, it ran late, as you know, with all the injuries to Mulhern, whatever. And then
just finished.
Well, one literally said, "Can you keep filling?" Because there was a rugby game on. And I thought it'd be 2 minutes. It was nearly 10 minutes we were filling for. And I'm going, hurry up, like, you know. Sort of like, but as you've got to just sort of make things up as you go along most of the sort of thing, and it's kind of a different discipline to doing something like this. As you can press an edit button. I don't get that luxury, you know. You just need to. But fortunately, I'm good at talking apparently. So
the one I'd love to go on that, which is fascinating to be around, is Sky Sports, you know, the Gillette Soccer Saturday they do, because the stats that they bring out, just like, you know, some bloke scored for, you know, for Walsall in League Two, and they just trot stats out, like, you know, first goal since February, first goal at home for 9 months, former Salford striker, and you're kind of like, so that must be, it must be mainly in here, but also on, you know, a screen in front of you. The speed of the way they do it's amazing.
When you had Jim Proudfoot on, I think he was pretty upfront and honest enough to say that he's actually got research teams as well. I have a research but it's not going to happen on a local radio budget, like, you know. It's I've got a lot of people working, and as you said, it's like, listen, don't get me wrong, the studio I work for are just, in my opinion, and quite a lot of people's opinion, they're the best in the business for a local radio station, and they information sometimes, like, you know, it's we might get like, say myself and Sam were saying, this done that. There's a good chance that they're listening over. One of them will have a quick check. Does feed down to us. They are that, but
and we get like Exeter and Plymouth scores as well straight away. So in your ear, you get like Exeter 1-0 up, and then stuff like that. It's absolutely on it.
No one wants to hear that though, do they?
well, ironically, Chris, I know there's some people that seem to be offended when I mention stuff like that, but the clues in the title called Radio Devon, not Radio
Devon. Yeah. Are they not wear that out?
No, somebody was giving me a bit of dog's abuse online for mentioning an Exeter game, and I was like, but I literally just said a minute ago, we're now joined by the Exeter listeners, blah blah, and so on, and depending what frequency and so on, you know, that there's obviously, if we're on all frequencies, there's a better chance of Plymouth Argyle fans and Exeter City fans listening. So if they've played earlier in the day and they just join, it's my job to read it out and stuff, but I don't think anybody appreciates that as much. It's Although
It's a thankless task in a way, as we said. You're always going to get people, yeah, aren't you?
you asked me earlier on, Sam, about little funny moments, and actually, I've just thought of one regarding Exeter. It was a couple of years ago, just after Kevin Nicholson had become the assistant manager there, and he's obviously, hugely associated with Torquay. And before the game, sometimes if you've seen the emails we get, and they asked me to do, like, I invited Clive to do a Vox a couple of weeks ago, and sometimes they asked me to go about, and it comes in the email, and I looked at it and I went, this must be a joke. And they basically, as Torquay were going through one of the worst runs in recent years, they asked me to go about and interview the fans and how Kevin Nicholson's doing at Exeter. I mean, you're just trying to get me punched here, aren't you? Like, good news, Kevin's doing well at Exeter. What do you think about it? And they're just looking at me going, but it's fun, I mean, they don't do it for any bad reasons, but that was a moment I thought, right, I'll be lucky to come out of here.
That's great. Clive, have you got the questions so I go into it from the listeners, the viewers?
We normally call this Kelly's Corner, but I think
Kelly's not
on
here.
Duty.
Clive's Corner.
Clive's Corner. I have a question from Rachel Malik, and she would like to know, it's a 3-part question, and it's all about Scotland. Do you have a favourite? I'll ask you one at a time, if that's all right. Favourite Scottish footballer, either currently or historically?
Historically, by a distance, Jimmy Johnson, which is very historic, to be fair, but you'll probably remember him, Clive, as much more than perhaps Chris or Sam would, but he was
a winger for Celtic. Is that
he? And not enough for Scotland. He was a little diminutive winger, about 5'4", ginger-haired Scot, but he was a genuine world-class player. It would run round everybody, and he had the character to go with it. If you ever read up on him, you'll read as much about his off-field antics as his on-field antics. But I was lucky growing up that I got to see the tail end of his career, and even then, it was just wow. He was on a different level. He's probably the best story for him was Celtic won a European Cup many years ago, and we don't want to talk too much about the Champions League tonight.
Just going to say slightly better than last night then.
They went and played Real Madrid for Di Stefano's testimonial, and he went there and ran rings round Real Madrid and got applauded off the park in front of 80,000 fans. He was just if you ever get a chance, go onto YouTube. He was an incredible player, and it's, in my opinion, a good example of sometimes what's wrong with modern elite football. It was tactics, this and whatever, just chuck him the ball, go and do it, and he would go and do it type of thing. Right. My kind of player, if you like.
So John Robertson at Forest, I thought was similar as well, because he wasn't an athlete, was he? But Cloughy knew, be nice to him, give him the ball, he'll do it for you.
Well, of all the teams I've ever seen, obviously Celtic was my Scottish team, and I used to go, plenty, and I've seen some of the greatest games I've ever had to offer. The Italian team that won the World Cup in 1982, most of them played for Juventus. I've seen them in 81, and it was 8 starters for the Italian World Cup winning team, plus a midfield 3 of Michel Platini, a guy called Boniek from Poland, and Liam Brady from Ireland, 3 genuine world-class players. But to the Nottingham Forest reference, they were probably the best team that I've ever seen coming to play at Celtic. They played them in a UEFA Cup in about 83, and it was a draw in Nottingham, and they won 2-1 in Glasgow, but honestly, they were just something special. They were unbelievable. And of course, with Brian Clough being there, they're never going to be a poor side, were they?
Wow. On the topic of Scotland, slightly different era, slightly different types of player. But my dad would not be happy if I didn't mention. My dad's a Blackburn Rovers fan, so I'd have to mention Colin Hendry, because as I was growing up, I could hear my dad waxing a completely different type of player to the one that you're talking about. But when it came to kind of no nonsense, older school defenders like you don't get nowadays, Colin Hendry was something else as well.
Well, Celtic could have done with one of them last night, couldn't they? It's
couldn't they? Yeah, couldn't they just?
I think we live in an era now, Chris, where I don't know. I feel disengaged from elite football, to be perfect. Like you've teams that are so far above, not just Celtic. I'm not saying it about Celtic, but even like really traditional European sides like Benfica and Ajax and other sides of calibre and stuff, and they've got absolutely no chance. Whereas Blackburn Rovers, I know they won a league in England and whatever sort of thing.
Yeah.
Teams like that, they've just got absolutely no chance now. But Colin Hendry, like, he actually played for Rangers for a little bit, so I'm not going to be
He did.
out on it.
I did think that. Yeah.
well, Chris, I don't know if ever, even at any level, Colin Hendry's the kind of guy you wanted on your team, isn't he? That's
Yeah.
You know, he might not be the Beckenbauer-esque silky player, but you always go out and give it 100%.
And he was a great defender as well. And when it comes to defending, he was absolutely rock solid. Yeah,
absolutely, easily. It's but as I said, as he played for Rangers, I'm not going to get.
We can't be too nice. Okay, fair enough.
Well, I'll just chuck in Billy Bremner because he was the heartbeat of my club for that decade when they came second in nearly everything.
Well, including Celtic, Clive. I'm going to throw that one in there in the European Cup one year as well.
70.
That's why you take it so well being a Somerset cricket fan, then, Clive.
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah, thanks very much for that. Rachel's last question is a little bit left field. Are you a music fan, Paul?
I am, yeah.
And so she'd like to know your favourite Scottish band, please.
Ooh. I wouldn't really have one. I probably need to steal a couple of bands actually and claim them as Scottish.
What's
probably not the Bay City Rollers, I'm guessing.
Not the Bay City Rollers or Shawaddy Waddy, I can confirm that. It's I would say Primal Scream, more for one album they've done, and well, AC/DC have got Scottish connections as well, so I'm going to steal them a little bit as well.
Mine would be Simple Minds, actually, is another one, and Biffy Clyro. They're my favourite Scottish bands.
I'm not. I'm more like Pink Floyd's my kind of stuff. I actually, I'm into music a little bit before my time as well, so I'm more like a Pink Floyd, the Eagles, Led Zeppelin.
Actually, yeah, no, they're my favourite bands as well. Moving on that.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that in the next commentary. If we have a 10-minute injury, and the next game we do together, we'll talk about Pink Floyd.
That's all I'm saying. Just don't ask me to sing.
Right, next question. This is a bit more serious now. Joe Uglow wants to know, in the previous era of the club, particularly when they were struggling, I guess, was there any pressure on you as to what you were allowed or not allowed to ask the manager?
Well, because I'm not a journalist, my remit is basically to talk about the game that happened that day. However, I feel a little bit, how can I put this politely? I don't like the fact that Torquay changed the press conference at the end of the game to being club-led. I believe the club should do it separately, right? I absolutely love Dom and Ian. I'm so happy that those guys kept their jobs. In fact, if I may just digress a little bit, one of the biggest things that really has got me behind this consortium as much as anything else was that they went in there and they have not laid anybody off. I was expecting to lose their jobs, and for that, for Michael and Mark and the consortium, brilliant guys. I'm so impressed by that. But that was before they come in, obviously. I don't know who made the decision. I've got my suspicions, but I don't know. But basically, what I was told after a couple of years, if you go back to like the National League South season when we won it, as I mentioned earlier, the BBC was always the one that would lead the press conference. After a couple of years, when things went south a little bit, shall we say, that then changed to the club asking questions. And I've obviously got no problem with that because I'm their guest, if you know what I mean. I have no problem with that as such. But I would like to have kept it separate a little bit. And also the other thing, probably maybe I'm reading into Joe's question too much here, but a lot of the times the club don't play out the BBC questions. You would need to go online to the BBC website to find the questions that we ask. So if the after-match interview might last 10 minutes, the club only play out 6 minutes of it, which is their own questions. Then the press, which in this case is me and Dave and whoever, we then get to ask our own questions. But the only way place you'll hear that is on a BBC website, or certainly the BBC questions anyway. So I'm going to take a guess that Joe's asking that because he feels that perhaps Gary Johnson wasn't pushed too much. My answer to that would be, I'm only there to talk about the game. The only directive that was ever given to me personally was from Gary Johnson, and he said, I don't mind answering your questions as long as they're not as the same as the club ones ask, which severely limits to me to what I can ask. So I can understand, if I'm reading the tone of Joe's question right, which I may not be, I can understand that sometimes they felt that it wasn't being pushed, whatever. But my remit from the station who employ me was to talk about the game and not about whether he's going to get sacked or whether he's going to get this and whatever. I also know, which I'm not going to name any names, but I know one instance after it, I feel a little bit unfair because Gary's not here to defend himself, but one of our commentators asked him a question which he didn't appreciate, and the minute that the tape stopped rolling, he turned around and had a go at him and said, don't ever ask that kind of questions again. So I've got a feeling, I think in the last couple of years of the previous reign, they closed ranks a little bit, and I'm not convinced that should have happened the way it did.
Great answer.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Haven't really got any others.
That's all good. Any other bits? So moving forwards, obviously, so we were talking about, as Charlie Baker tweeted it, your speech, and we spoke a little about this before we went there last time. Incredible speech during the final game of last season, the final win. I mean, I know your answer already, but I'll ask it anyway. Was it pre-planned? And yeah, I know it wasn't. I remember you saying, but just when you did that, was it like a... Yeah, explain it.
Yeah, well, right. As you know, Sam, I was a little bit active on a social media platform for a bit, but I made a decision to come off a lot of social media over the summer and whatever. And I had put on there that I was going to have a little bit of a rant. Now, when Charlie sent me that text, he literally sent me it the minute that game, or the second that game finished, and it just said, brilliant, Paul. Now, I didn't really know what it was about. During that game, and I probably shouldn't admit this in case the station listened to it, actually, I slaughtered 2 clubs in the National League South for what I felt was borderline bringing the game into disrepute. The first one was Taunton. Their pitch was a disgrace. They spent an absolute fortune on paying players money they clearly couldn't afford, neglected their ground, and it had a huge impact on a lot of teams, including Torquay at the end of the season. The other one, and I hope Paul Watton doesn't watch this, was Truro, and I gave them a good slaughtering as well, because I felt that they out with the spirit of the game. I actually felt, when we got to the end of the season, as I'm sure you all remember, there was times when they literally played 2 days in a row. However, to get themselves away from relegation and thus put Torquay and other teams into more, they went in and used the 28-day loan market and signed a lot of players, the likes of Ryan Law, who you might remember. But if Torquay or any, or Dartford or whoever were down there, Eastbourne at the time, if they used the 28-day loan market, that they got 5 games out there, players. Truro got 13. They didn't break any laws, but I thought it was a little bit unfair. So once I got that out my system, so to speak, I was sitting there, and the actual thing that Charlie tweeted isn't the full version of it. There is a little bit more of it as well. And it was 4-0 at the time, and I was sitting there and I was just looking about the stadium, and I looked over, and the pop side down towards the family stand in the centre section was mobbed, the bench was mobbed, the family stand was mobbed, and I thought, when are these people going to get treated with some respect, because as much as it would be unfair of me to say that I don't get treated with respect when I go to Torquay, because I know it's not a popular thing to say, but the old regime really did treat me well. I have to say, they all would made me welcome. I wouldn't say they're my friends, but they would exchange pleasantries. George Edwards, I know, was the bad guy, so to speak. But from my point of view, if George was here now, if he said to me, Paul, give me one example when I was off with you, I couldn't. It would be unfair. So I personally got treated very well. But I've got a saying in life, Sam, when one person says one thing and everybody else says the other, it's usually because everybody else is right. And so many people in Torquay, the fans, whatever, felt so disengaged with the club, so bad, whatever. And I was just looking about, and the next thing I just started saying it, and it went on and on. But I didn't genuinely, and I know this might sound nonsense, I honestly didn't know how well it had landed, for want of a better word, because my social media activity was so limited. So it was only a few weeks ago, actually, Clive, when I joined Twitter, Clive posted something on Twitter which was really, really humbling. I don't recall the exact words, Clive, but it was along the lines of, "You've become a special part of the club, particularly for the exiles." And I thought, whoa, it was a really nice thing to say. And then Rachel, who I think's the same person that asked the question earlier, also posted it. And some of the stuff on it, I was genuinely, I don't believe this, I swear on my life, that was kind of me learning how well that seemed to go down. And it seemed like a lot of Torquay fans appreciated it and stuff. So it came from the heart, is the best way I can say it. And to use a comparison, I said I support Celtic sort of thing. To use a comparison, when I used to go to the Celtic matches when I lived in Scotland, for me, listen, it's not about how many trophies a team win. It's not about how much money you spend on a player. It's about a camaraderie, feeling like you're with your mates, even if you don't know them, feeling like that somebody's got your back, even if it's just for 90 minutes or 2 hours a football match goes on. And I think that's epitomised best it can at Torquay, to be perfectly honest. I've said it many times. I know that was the one that gained the attention. I genuinely 100% believe that Torquay, in my opinion, have got the best fans in England. I genuinely mean that. I'm not saying it. I've got nothing to gain by saying it. I genuinely, Chris, I've seen you at plenty of away games and whatever, like, you know, you travel up and down the country. Clive, I think you've got shares in British Rail or whatever, like, you're always... There's nowhere that's close for Torquay. Even Yeovil's an hour and a half away. The dedication and the passion that they show, and as I said, you ask a Torquay fan, why do you support Torquay? Not one of them will ever answer because of how many trophies we win. It's not the case. It's about I'll say brotherhood or sisterhood, whatever way you want to say it. It's about feeling included in whatever, and I genuinely believe that Torquay epitomise that better than any team in the whole of England.
We're unique, aren't we? It's a unique club. It's a unique club. It's a unique club. It's always something a bit different. It's, you know,
the geography alone dictates that to an extent. But as I said, listen, that game, when I had that rant or spiel, whatever you want to call it, over 3,300 Torquay fans turned up when, truthfully, most of us should have been lying in a dark room getting over the previous couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Only the Tuesday before that, when it Taunton actually confirmed safety, like, you know. Meaningless game, and I looked about and I thought, do you know what? There is something special about this club, and it's not in the bricks and mortars, it's not in the players, it's not in who's in the boardroom, it's who's on the terrace, and they're the ones. And I apologise, I'm going to sound really arrogant here. The last few months have proven that what I've said has been categorically correct, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
behind the team, they've put money in. Truthfully, some of them probably can't really afford it and whatever. It's not the most affluent area. But the minute that it looked like their team potentially could go out of existence, they didn't just turn up. More of them came. And then when the consortium went in and never lied to anybody, told everybody the truth and said, listen, guys, to do what we're trying to do here, we need your help, we need your money. And what, 220 grand? Outstanding. I genuinely still can't believe it. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me it's a joke, but it's been phenomenal.
It's mad. It's ridiculous. Go on, Chris.
Just going to say this one, we had Bob Cole on in the first half tonight from the Trust, and I said to him, kind of, from the beginning of it, if you could have imagined this is how it ended up, could you ever, because if I said to you, the day we went to administration, show me the best case scenario, and he said, well, this is better than that. Whatever you could have imagined, he said. It was just, and it's just unbelievable, isn't it? It's unreal the way that what's followed in the last 9 months.
When it started, Chris, I mean, on that day of the last game of the season, perhaps I'd swallowed some brave pills, because I was sitting there and going, I don't know if I'm going to be back here, sort of thing. And then it's when there was talks about, because you have to remember, the consortium got KO'd at first. And they all come back. And there was a time when it looked, you're thinking, are they trying to sort of, look, for want of a better expression, program the fans into accepting step 9 football and stuff? That was a distinct possibility. I mean, it's a real fear. And as I said, history will show you in football, at any club, when things start getting worse, people tend to run away. At Torquay, they did the opposite. And for that, I personally think, I know they're putting the board up and stuff, but I genuinely think that consortium as well, I don't want to use the old silly adage, but build a statue for the lot of them. But something's got to be done to.
Yeah, incredible. We live through
Yeah.
history. All of us live through history of it, and
Yeah.
it just means so much more now. Like I've always wanted Torquay to win, but it's like almost not a pressure, but there's an extra like bit on it now. Like I care so much on these results. I almost get even more sort of up and down with like the
I
results.
think it matters. It feels like it matters more because you know what these blokes deserve.
Yeah,
Don't you? You know all that's gone on. You kind of know the next part of this story is winning promotion and getting back in the National League, and getting back in the Football League. But clearly, real life is not a fairy tale, is it? Which unfortunately is where it falls down because you've got to win it on the pitch. But that feels like that's the next step of the story. Almost,
next season or two, it's going to be ridiculous. Honestly, the Torquay will just be an incredible place to be if it isn't already.
Where Bryn need to be given just enormous credit is that it was all very well actually at the Aveley game, 3,000 people turning up, and people sort of put their hands in their pockets as supporters. But what Bryn have done is allow that to be properly channeled, and actually the supporters now not only are a big part of the club, the supporters own 28% of it now.
Yeah.
And without that openness from Bryn and actually realizing that, you know, we are stronger together, there's another cliche for you. Without that, you know, it wouldn't look anything like it does now. And it's just, as you said, it's a wonderful thing to be a part of.
But Clive, you said it's a cliche, but the reality is that cliches tend to be based in truth. And as I said, let's go back 6 months. Can you imagine Osborne or George Edwards or Mel Heyman or whoever it was saying, right, guys, we've got a good idea. We're going to ask you all for a minimum of 250 quid. How do you think that would have went? They've made...
There was a discussion earlier because on the day they announced they were going into administration for the first time, their first meaningful engagement with the trust was to ask for 60 grand. And it says it all. I mean, and you know, Clark Osborne, you could have had this. You could have had this.
It's quite easy, to be honest.
But you know, you had your chance and you blew it, mate. I'm sorry.
I still don't get his angle. I really
struggle. No, I will never understand it.
It just was strange that they were putting so much money in. But of course, you mentioned about on the pitch, which I'll stick to now if I don't mind. If the consortium are telling us the truth, and I've got no reason to suggest they're not, I would love to know how, with virtually double the budget, they had a team last year that was as bad as that. It was diabolical at times.
And it wasn't put together right either. There's no depth.
It was, well, I mean, I'm going to take a guess here. I think that some of the players, when they come down from the National League to the South, I actually think some of them got a wage rise. I'm convinced that some of them signed a like on higher money. And listen, I'm not saying I know how to run a football club, but I would certainly say I know how not to.
Wouldn't have been like that, would it?
Well, certainly. Your centre half, even though you've got us relegated, conceding 100 goals, or not literally, have an extra 50% in your wage packet. It's not exactly aiming for the stars, is it, really? But I think for all the Torquay fans, everybody's glad it's gone, you know. To be fair, they brought some good times. Gary Johnson done some good things, but it clearly wasn't working anymore. And the fact that the fans were just kept at such a distance and stuff like that, it was never going to work. And as I said, relating back to what I said that day, I was lucky with the words I got that seemed to be right. But the minute that the fans feel involved, it's like in any walk of life, if you treat people with respect, you'll get it back. And the Torquay fans have been just unbelievably, it's phenomenal how good they've been. Unbelievable.
How it's all gone. But there we are. So anything else to add? Chat's been amazing.
Well, if I may just add something.
Yeah, go for it.
I just thank you to all you guys. I don't watch you all the time sort of thing, but what I usually do is I tend to catch up, like, you know, sort of thing, and most of you have always been very kind to me, and I genuinely, it is truly humbling, and I really, really appreciate it. And to the people that have said nice things about me on Twitter since I've joined there as well, I genuinely do appreciate it. I don't know what it is I'm doing right, but all I know
deserve it.
Well,
it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully.
Definitely.
It's been brilliant. It's a passion for the game, and just and going through all of it, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Well, I think because I want Torquay to win as well probably helps a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought commentators were neutral, Paul.
You're one of us. You might not have been at the start, but you absolutely are, mate. So thank you for all you do.
I do try to be neutral sometimes, but there has been a couple of times when I've possibly failed in that respect, shall we say. But
again, what's the radio station called?
Exactly.
It's called BBC Radio Neutral, is it?
As long as you're respectful, and I pitched it for the away fans listening as well, so they understand. But yeah.
I know, if there's going to be an away radio there, I can be a little bit freer. But as you said, listen, I do. Yeah. Sometimes the radio say we might have a big listenership from whatever, tone it down a wee bit, whatever. And I like to think I'm reasonably balanced. But as I said, at the end of the day, I hope it comes across that I've got.
I was getting really critical and annoyed at Dawkins' passing at one point. So I was just like, that's really poor from Dawkins. At times you have to almost be balanced like everyone's listening. Because I said to Paul before we went on that when we were all in lockdown watching all these streams, there's nothing more annoying than when we're away and the commentators are so obvious, every little decision, and not giving it the benefit. Oh, come on, that's obviously a Torquay decision. So I was like, right, we went in with that balance. But you're right, it is hard. I find it very difficult to keep my emotions, especially that Hassani goal in. I didn't think I made a noise, but it turns out I did. I think I did a bit of Gary Neville. I went, whoa.
Well, one of the times when I was less than impressed with officiating and made it clear was actually last year at Yeovil. And it was half inspired by you, Chris, believe it or not, because I know you were there and I was sitting in the commentary booth and you were in the seats, right?
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
Early on in the game, Brad Ash made a run and one of their defenders just came out and battered him, just checked him, through and goal. I don't know.
Centre half, wasn't it? Yeah.
Jake Wannell, yeah.
But did I see that right? And then I just looked over and all I could see was Chris
always look at Chris
standing up, giving it.
I'm so happy. If you see me at the St Albans game, oh my god, so many fuses were blown in my mind in that game. That would have been the ultimate test.
I know Somerset were covering it, so I probably got away with it, but I was less than confident about some of the decisions that day.
There is a bit of a backstory to that, actually, Paul, funnily enough, actually, and it's a really unbelievable story, but there were no naughty words because I was with my children, just for the record. But that Jake Wannell, who knows who watches, I used to work with his mum. So I knew him when he was a little kid growing up. Yeah. So I used to work with his mum, and then when I saw him like that, and then he battered one of our lads, I just something went inside me. But it was a pretty lumpy tackle on it, and because it was him, Clive will tell you, I used to be I was sat next to Clive as well. Well, I used to be much worse than I am now, so that's worrying.
Yeah, no, it's bad.
Reaction to the fans, and I was sitting there saying, "Did I see that right?" type of thing, and then I just seen you up the finger going, "Yeah, I did." So I just on the radio, but no, fair play.
There we are. No, amazing. What an amazing guest, and both guests actually, Bob and Paul, this week, incredible.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Paul. Really interesting.
Yeah, it's so good. It'd be nice to talk about some football games again soon. And then the idea, when apart from this weekend, when we've got a game at Playmore again, Maystone's gone now. So I was meant to be on commentary with that, so that's annoying.
Yeah, well, I've seen that you were sort of penciled in for it, and I thought
I've got two others now. Go on November and December, so don't you worry.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see you back. Did you enjoy it?
I absolutely loved it.
No one else did, but
yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. It's one of the best days I've ever had. I helped the Torquay win, and it was great because it's like you put a photo on social media. I'm not a social media person, and every person's liking it. It just see like BBC, he's doing well, and all that. So it's one of those days. I was high on dopamine all night from the buzz of it, all the likes, all the comments. So the come down next day.
With you though, Sam, I have a slight bone to pick with you. Just to confirm, I'm not a South American person with loads of bees on my face. I don't know when you tagged me in that, you literally tagged the wrong person.
I don't know how I did that. I tagged a Paul. It just was. I pressed Paul. He tagged it, and then it was just I looked later and I went, "What have I done there?" So I was just just gone with just happiness.
Never look at that person's profile. His profile picture, I think he's South American of some denomination, and he basically had loads of bees or wasps around his face. I was like,
"Yeah, wrong Paul."
Not
Wrong
me.
Paul it was. Yeah, wrong
I
Paul.
did look at it and think, I wouldn't have thought Paul had been to bees. I looked again, I was like, oh, hang on, that's not him.
I had too many nice comments to delete it. That was my problem.
Yeah.
My favourite bit actually
This-
was when you called our photo Laura and Hardy look-alike. That absolutely cracked me up. That was incredible. That was amazing.
I-
Don't have him on too much though, because it's stroking his ego, Paul. It's stroking his ego. Don't have him on too much.
I used to be I'm in a band, and now it's I was on BBC once, and in a band as well. So
Should have said.
there we are. So well, there's everything. Thank you so much. And when we do the next one, I will tag the right Paul Mulhern on Twitter. So thank you so much for watching, listening, everyone, and we'll be back next week.
Here's Hargreaves, chance for Torquay. Chris Hargreaves, the captain. If he stays onside, Carlisle checks instead. He's looking for Benyon. Sells.